Hey guys, welcome back to the garage with the Yamaha YZ 426F. Today we're gonna do a valve clearance check. I have a feeler gauge, but enough with the chit chat, let's get on it. To do the job, there are a few things you can absolutely do on your own without anybody tell you how to, and it's remove the seat, remove the tank, remove the shroud, and that is about it. Now, let's get a little bit more in and see what else you need to remove or pull out of the way to do the job. So you've done everything on that side, you come to this side and there are a few things you got to remove. First of all, it's the valve cover, which is simply two bolts up there, remove it. And then on the valve cover, you also need to disconnect the two breather hoses, one over here, which I tied to the side, and one over here, which I tied up top. And this thing in theory will come out. Now, if you have this model here, there is another thing you need to remove, and that is those rear engine brackets, because if you don't remove this, you don't have enough room to lift this up and move it out. Do not try to pry this out, do not try to force it out. This is magnesium, it'll break. So remove those and forget about it. Those two plugs need to be open, and that's where not having any oil in the engine comes handy, because otherwise you're gonna have some oil seeping out of there. And you need to do this because from this hole you're gonna be able to see if you're top dead center, among other things up here, and because you can use that bolt in there to rotate the engine to top dead center. Once you've done this, there is only one more thing to do, and it's to loosen up the chain tensioner. If after you check the clearance, you're gonna end up needing to remove both the cams to adjust, then you can tie this with a wire over here. Or if you find out that one is good and one is not, or one is good and one is not, you can just zip tie the chain on this side and just let that loose. What are we trying to avoid is for the chain to fall down there, which is gonna make a really bad day because you gotta go fish it out or possibly remove the head. You don't wanna do that. This is an easy job, you wanna do it fast and you wanna do it with the least amount of problems, and prevention is the way to go here. But moving on. At this point, you need to bring the piston top dead center. So to do that, you need, in this year model, a 14mm socket, and you just stuff it in there. By doing this, you're gonna be able to rotate the engine however you want. One thing to make your job easy is the decomp lever up here. If you pull the decomp lever, the engine rotates much easier than if you don't. How do you know when you get to top dead center? Where there are a few indicators. First of all, if you look in here, there are notches and it says HI. You need to align with the notches on the case. Second, if you look up here, it says E and I on both cams, E and I. And then also you have dots. You actually have three dots, one over here, and one over here. And you need to align the dots with the case. Now, if you want one more, you go on the other side, and the cam lobes, they're pointing out 180 degrees from each other. Before we keep going, I cannot recommend to buy one of those enough. All the specs, all the valve clearance number, everything is in here. Do yourself a favor, get one of those. It's always good to have a written reference. Now the book says that for the intake size should be between 0.10 millimeters and 0.15 millimeters. I have a 0.10 millimeters right here, and I'm gonna put this between the lobe of the cam and the little valve seat underneath. Try to be parallel. This thing needs to go in and just stick a little bit. That means that's the right distance. And fortunately enough, this is right on spec, it's 010. Now if we try with the next one over, which is the 013 millimeters, and try to put it in there, it doesn't quite go in. You really need to force it. So that is good. That means this lobe on the intake is good, but I'm gonna do all three of them and see what's going on.
2 hours later.
So this one is on spec and I'm not gonna touch it. So let's move on to the exhaust side. The exhaust side needs to be between 0.20 millimeters to 0.25 millimeters. Let's start with the 0.20 and let's see how it goes. It does not go in. We gotta go down one size. Let's go down to the 0.15. And the 0.15 goes in pretty good on both sides. So 0.05 millimeters too close. Since the intake valve clearance is good, I don't have to touch it. I'm gonna concentrate on the exhaust valve. Since we need to do the exhaust valve, what I'm gonna do is zip tie the chain to my intake valve so I don't need to actually hang it anywhere. It's time to loosen up the chain tensioner. And I'm gonna try just to loosen it up. I don't want to remove it altogether. In theory, if I understand it correctly, undoing this and unscrewing the inside will retract the chain tensioner. I'm gonna try to do that without having to remove it altogether. All right, by inserting a little screwdriver in there, you should be able to unwind and loosen up the chain by turning clockwise, which is counterintuitive, but that's the way it is. At this point, you can leave it there and the chain is loose. It's time to unscrew the camshaft holding bracket over here, holding thingy. And everybody says to do it on a star pattern, which would make sense, but the book says to do it 1, 2, 3, and 4, and a little bit at a time. A little bit here, a little bit here, and then on and on. So I'm gonna do what the book says, and let's get on it. Those should be torqued at 10 Newton meters, so it shouldn't be that hard to pull them off. Once the bolts have been removed, it's time to remove the cover. It might be slightly hard to pull up, but work it out nice and slowly and pull it up. There is going to be some residual oil in there, and another thing to look for is this little half moon or whatever you want to call it that sits right on top of the cam and that goes pretty much inside here to make it all work. So remove that, and at this point let's see if we can remove the cam. Here we go. Cam is out. So once you remove the exhaust cam, this is what's underneath, and the shims that we need to replace to change the play between the lobe and the valves is under this thing. To pull that thing up, just get yourself a magnet, put it on it, and just pull up. What happens is most time the shim actually stays in here. Sometimes it'll stay stuck in there. So once you remove the cover, you actually gotta go fetch the shim. And now this is the shim that you need to adjust to either increase or decrease the gap. If your bike has a decomp lever, the decomp lever gets in the way, so you actually need to pull it back so that you can lift the shim. Pulling it back is very easy, just undo that bolt, slide it back a little bit until the shim is free to come out. And that's it. According to the specs, according to this book, the exhaust side should be between 0.20 millimeters to 0.25 millimeters. So our 0.15 millimeter gap, it's too small. So we need to increase the gap between the lobe and the valve. And we have shims. The shims is sitting in there, and the shim adds some volume. So to increase the gap, we need to use a thinner shim. Once you have the shim in hand, grab a caliper. You want to make sure that the shim is actually the size that says on it. So just measure it. This is a 185, which means we need to use a 180. Subtract those 0.05. This is a hot cam shim kit, and they're numbered than 180. This shim is thinner than this shim, which means that if I put it in there, now my gap has increased. So let's go put it on the bike and let's make sure it works. If you're doing the intake side as well, you need to do exactly the same thing. See what shims is in there, see how far you are from the optimal gap, and then either subtract or add, depending if you need to increase the gap or reduce the gap. Now that you figure out which valve shim you need to use, just put it back on top of the valve in its little seat over there, and then put the cover right on top of it. And that's it. At this point, just put the camshaft back on, torque it to spec, and check the gap again. If it's good, it's good. If it's not, repeat. Once you've done all that and you have the appropriate gap, it's time to put the shaft back in. All right, it seems aligned properly, the gap is right, the lobes are pointing away from each other, everything looks good. Don't forget the little half moon that goes over here on the bearing. I'm gonna put the cover back on, I'm gonna put the 4 bolts back on, torque it to spec, and I'll catch you up when I'm done. What is left to do right now is to release the chain tensioner. So if you guys pay attention up here, you're gonna see this tension up. There we go. And there it is, tensioned up. Perfect. Everything seems to be okay. At this point, we can cut this, pull it out. It's time to put the cover back on the chain tensioner. Now take a look at the copper washer in here. If you see that it's too wore out or too squished, it's time to replace it. Otherwise, put it back in. All right, the only thing left to do is to put a cap over there and put everything back on. You guys can do that on your own. There is nothing difficult about it. 2 bolts over there, 3 bolts over here, the seat and the fuel tank. I'm not gonna waste your time. You can do that on your own. You have just successfully adjusted your valves and the bike is ready to go. For everything I used in this video, check the description down below. Thank you very much to my patrons, because all the parts, or some of the parts used in this video have been acquired with the help of the patrons, and hopefully this will make this job less daunting. This is a very easy job. You just need to know what to look for. As always, get the manual. The manual tells you exactly what to look for, tells you exactly the numbers you need to look at. just check the description. There's gonna be a list of the stuff I used on this. Other than that, if you guys like the video, like. If you love the video, subscribe. Work on your bike, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.